The morning Marcus Wheeler discovered the freshly installed electric vehicle charging station on his property, he nearly dropped his coffee mug. The sleek, white charging unit stood like a monument to bureaucratic overreach, its LED display glowing smugly in the early dawn light. It was planted squarely on the corner of his 2-acre plot, right where his property line met the HOA's community area, except it wasn't on the community side. Marcus had lived in Pine Ridge Estates for 15 years, long before the Homeowners Association had transformed from a reasonable neighborhood group into what he privately called the suburban Gestapo. He'd weathered their measuring tape raids on fence heights, their militant stance on mailbox colors, and their bizarre obsession with grass length. But this was different. He walked closer, his work boots crunching on the dewy grass. A laminated notice was zip-tied to the charger. Pine Ridge Estates Community EV Charging Station Number 3. For resident use only. Installed per HOA Covenant Amendment 47B. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He'd voted against that amendment 6 months ago, along with a handful of other longtime residents. They'd been outnumbered by the newer residents who drove Teslas and talked about sustainable community initiatives at every meeting. The problem wasn't the environmental consciousness. Marcus had solar panels on his barn and grew his own vegetables. The problem was that Amendment 47B had specified the charging stations would be installed in designated community areas. His property was not a community area. It was his land, purchased with his hard-earned money, maintained by his callous hands. By 7:30, Marcus was on the phone with the HOA president, Patricia Kensington. Her voice was as crisp as her perfectly pressed HOA blazers always were. Mr. Wheeler, the board determined that corner of your property serves as a de facto community space due to its proximity to the walking path. De facto. Marcus gripped the phone tighter. Patricia, that's my land. You can't just. The easement allows for community improvements, Mr. Wheeler. Page 847 of the covenant clearly states, the easement is for underground utilities, not for you to plant a car charger on my lawn. The board's decision is final. The charging station stays. Have a pleasant day. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone, then at the charging station. 3 cars were already lined up to use it, their drivers sipping lats and scrolling through phones. One of them, a man in a suit Marcus recognized from the last HOA meeting, gave him a cheerful wave. Marcus didn't wave back. Instead, he walked to his barn where his tools hung in neat rows and his workshop smelled of sawdust and motor oil. He ran his hand along the workbench, thinking. The HOA had made their move. They'd planted their flag on his territory, probably assuming he'd roll over like everyone else did when faced with their legal doublespeak and bureaucratic bullying. But Marcus Wheeler was not everyone else. He was an electrician by trade, a farmer by choice, and a stubborn son of a gun by nature. If the HOA wanted to play games with property lines and easements, well, he knew a thing or two about creative interpretation himself. He pulled out his phone and started researching. By noon, he had a plan. By evening, he was smiling for the first time all day. The HOA had no idea what they just started. Marcus Wheeler spent the next 3 days doing what he did best, research and planning. His kitchen table became a war room covered in property documents, HOA covenants, and electrical schematics. His laptop stayed open to obscure zoning law websites and agricultural exemption codes. Empty coffee cups accumulated like soldiers gathering for battle. On the 4th morning, Marcus's neighbor, Tom Chen, found him stringing wire along the property line. Tom was one of the few allies Marcus had left in Pine Ridge Estates, another longtime resident who remembered when the neighborhood was about community barbecues, not compliance citations. What are you up to, Marcus? Tom asked, leaning against the fence post. Marcus hammered another grounding rod into the earth. Livestock management. Livestock. Tom's eyebrows rose. Since when do you have livestock? Since yesterday. Marcus grinned and pointed toward his barn, where a newly constructed chicken coop housed 6 Rhode Island Reds. They pecked contentedly at the ground, blissfully unaware of their role in Marcus's plan. Meet the ladies. They're my new egg-laying operation. Tom laughed. And they need an electric fence? Absolutely. Lots of predators around here. Foxes, coyotes, Marcus paused meaningfully, HOA board members who think they can trespass on private property. The brilliance of Marcus's plan lay in its simplicity. The county's agricultural ordinances, which predated the HOA by decades, allowed property owners with livestock to install electric fencing for protection. Moreover, these ordinances superseded any HOA regulations. It was right there in black and white, County Code Section 15.32. Marcus had even gone the extra mile, registering his property as a small agricultural operation with the county. The 6 chickens technically qualified him, and the fresh eggs were a nice bonus. But the real genius was in the placement of the fence. The electric fence would run along the exact property line where the EV charger stood, creating a protective barrier around his agricultural operation. And since the HOA had so generously installed a high-capacity electrical connection right there on his property, well, it would be wasteful not to use it. Patricia Kensington arrived that afternoon in her white Mercedes, her face pinched with disapproval as she surveyed the fence posts. "Mr. Wheeler, what exactly do you think you're doing?" "Protecting my livestock, Patricia." Marcus kept working, not bothering to look up. "It's all perfectly legal. I have the permits right here if you'd like to see them." She snatched the papers from his outstretched hand, her manicured nails clicking against the clipboard. As she read, her face grew progressively redder. This is clearly a retaliatory action against the board's decision. Retaliatory? Marcus feigned surprise. "I'm just a small farmer trying to protect his chickens. Nothing to do with that charging station you illegally placed on my property." "It's not illegal. The easement clearly allows for underground utilities," Marcus finished. "Not above-ground installations. I've read it a dozen times, Patricia. But hey, I'm not asking you to remove it. In fact, I'm grateful for the electrical access. They'll save me a fortune on running power to my fence." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't dare." Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that had unnerved HOA presidents for generations. "Watch me." That night, under cover of darkness and with the expertise of 30 years in the electrical trade, Marcus began the delicate work of integration. The charging station's power supply was robust, designed to handle multiple vehicles simultaneously. More than enough to power an electric fence with plenty left over. He worked methodically, installing an automatic transfer switch that would redirect power to the fence whenever the charger was activated. It was elegant, really. The fence would only be energized when someone tried to use the charging station. The rest of the time, it would appear to be a normal, harmless agricultural fence. By dawn, the system was complete. Marcus stood back to admire his handiwork, then went inside to make breakfast. Fresh eggs from his new chickens seemed appropriate for the occasion. The first victim was Bradley Morrison, Pine Ridge Estate's most enthusiastic Tesla owner and self-appointed EV ambassador for the community. At 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, he pulled up to charging station number 3 with his usual grimy oat milk latte and NPR podcast ready to go. Marcus watched from his kitchen window, coffee in hand, as Bradley connected his car to the charger. The moment Bradley pressed the activation button, the transfer switch Marcus had installed kicked in. Power flowed, but not to Bradley's Tesla. Instead, it surged through the electric fence, creating a protective barrier that hummed with 8,000 volts of agricultural security. Bradley frowned at his dashboard. The charging indicator flickered, then died. He disconnected, reconnected, tried again. Same result. The charger's LED display showed it was functioning normally, drawing power, but his car remained uncharged. "Piece of junk," Bradley muttered, loud enough for Marcus to hear through the open window. By noon, word had spread through the HOA's Facebook group. Charging station number 3 was malfunctioning. 3 more EV owners had tried and failed to charge their vehicles. Patricia Kensington herself had made an appearance, her Audi e-tron refusing to accept a single kilowatt. Marcus went about his day, whistling while he collected eggs and tended to his garden. The fence hummed on and off like a symphony, each activation coinciding with another frustrated EV owner. The chickens seemed to enjoy their new protective barrier, pecking contentedly near the fence line whenever it wasn't active. On Wednesday, the HOA sent their maintenance contractor, a young man named Derek, who looked thoroughly confused by the whole situation. Marcus met him at the property line with fresh lemonade and helpful concern. "Strange problem you've got there," Marcus said, watching Derek test the charger with a multimeter. "Everything working okay?" Derek scratched his head. "That's the thing, Mr. Wheeler. Electrically, everything checks out. The unit's drawing power, all the connections are solid, but," he gestured helplessly at the charger. "But it's not charging cars," Marcus finished. "That is strange. I noticed it happens right around the same time my fence activates. Must be some kind of interference." Derek's eyes widened. "Your fence is connected to this circuit?" "Oh no," Marcus said innocently. "My fence has its own dedicated connection. Completely separate system. See?" He pointed to the junction box he'd installed, which indeed showed 2 separate circuits, at least from the outside. Though they do share the same transformer up on the pole. Maybe that's causing some kind of feedback. Derek spent another hour testing, finding nothing wrong because technically nothing was wrong. The charger was functioning perfectly. It just happened to be powering the wrong device. By Thursday, the situation had escalated. A line of angry EV owners confronted Patricia at the community center, demanding answers. Marcus heard about it from Tom, who'd attended the impromptu meeting for entertainment value. "You should have seen it," Tom laughed, sitting on Marcus's porch that evening. Bradley Morrison was practically in tears. said he had to use a regular outlet in his garage like some kind of caveman, and Patricia kept insisting it must be your fence causing interference. Marcus sipped his beer thoughtfully. Interference? That's a serious accusation. I hope she has proof. The next day, Patricia arrived with reinforcements, the HOA's lawyer, Richard Steinberg, and an electrical engineer named Dr. Sarah Patel. Marcus greeted them at his property line, his chickens clucking nearby. Mr. Wheeler, Steinberg began in his best courtroom voice, we have reason to believe you're intentionally sabotaging HOA property. Sabotage? Marcus looked genuinely hurt. I'm just a small farmer trying to protect his livestock. Dr. Patel, you're welcome to inspect my fence installation. Everything's up to code. Dr. Patel spent 2 hours examining the system. She found Marcus's work to be exemplary. Every connection properly grounded, every component correctly rated, all permits in order. The transfer switch was hidden inside a locked junction box marked agricultural equipment only, which Marcus explained was for safety reasons. I can't find any code violations, Dr. Patel finally admitted to Patricia. The fence installation is actually quite professional. Patricia's face turned purple. But the charger only fails when his fence is on. Correlation isn't causation, Marcus said helpfully. Maybe the charger is just defective. Happens with new technology sometimes. As they left, Marcus heard Steinberg mutter to Patricia, we need more evidence before we can take legal action. Marcus smiled and tossed some fresh corn to his chickens. The evidence they needed was locked inside his junction box, hidden behind a masterwork of electrical engineering that would make any inspector proud. And the beautiful part? Everything he'd done was technically legal. The charger was on his property, the power it drew was being used on his property, and his fence was protecting his legitimate agricultural operation. The HOA had wanted to play games with property rights. Marcus was simply playing by their rules, just more creatively than they'd anticipated. Patricia Kensington was not a woman who accepted defeat. By Monday morning, she had marshaled the full resources of the Pine Ridge Estates HOA, and they were considerable. The emergency board meeting was held in the community center, the standing room only. Marcus wasn't invited, but Tom Chan provided a full report afterward. They hired a private investigator, Tom told Marcus over coffee, and they're bringing in some specialist electrician from the city, guy who apparently works on industrial sabotage cases. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, scratching one of his chickens behind her comb. Industrial sabotage seems a bit dramatic for a simple fence interference issue. A specialist arrived Wednesday afternoon, a gruff, no-nonsense man named Frank Kowalski, who looked like he'd seen every electrical trick in the book. He came with an arsenal of diagnostic equipment and a skeptical expression that suggested he wasn't buying Marcus's innocent farmer routine. Mr. Wheeler, Kowalski said, setting up his equipment near the charger. I'm going to monitor this system for the next 48 hours. Every electron that moves through these lines, I'll know about it. Be my guest, Marcus replied. Just don't disturb the chickens. They're laying. For 2 days, Kowalski camped out in a van equipped with enough monitoring gear to run a small power station. Marcus went about his routine, knowing that Kowalski's equipment would show exactly what was happening, power flowing from the charger to the fence whenever someone tried to charge their car. The question was whether Kowalski could prove it was intentional. On Friday afternoon, Kowalski presented his findings to the HOA board in another packed meeting. This time, Marcus was required to attend. Ladies and gentlemen, Kowalski began projecting diagrams onto a screen. Mr. Wheeler has created what I can only describe as an elegant piece of electrical engineering. The charging station is indeed powering his fence, but, he paused for effect, everything is technically legal. The room erupted. Patricia slammed her gavel repeatedly. What do you mean legal? Kowalski pulled up a complex wiring diagram. The charger is on Mr. Wheeler's property. He has the right to use electricity from equipment on his property. His fence requires power for legitimate agricultural purposes. The transfer switch he's installed is up to code and properly permitted. He's not stealing electricity. The HOA is still paying for it. He's just redirecting it. But he's preventing our residents from charging their cars. Bradley Morrison stood up, his face red. No, Marcus said calmly, speaking for the first time. The charger is preventing residents from charging their cars. My fence just happens to need power at the same time. Coincidence. Richard Steinberg, the HOA lawyer, tried a different angle. This is clearly malicious interference with HOA property. Is it HOA property? Marcus asked, because it's on my land. And according to my property deed, anything permanently installed on my land becomes my property unless there's a specific agreement stating otherwise. Did we sign such an agreement, Patricia? Patricia's silence was answer enough. The meeting devolved into chaos. Some residents sided with Marcus, admitting the HOA had overstepped. Others demanded action, threatening to sue the board for failing to provide promised amenities. Through it all, Marcus sat quietly, occasionally checking his phone for egg prices at the local farmer's market. Finally, Steinberg played what he thought was his ace. Mr. Wheeler, we're prepared to take this to court. The negative publicity alone. Court sounds excellent, Marcus interrupted. I'm sure the judge would be fascinated to hear how the HOA illegally installed equipment on private property without permission. And I've already been in touch with Channel 7 News. They're very interested in doing a story about HOA overreach. Local farmer fights back against bullying. HOA. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? The room went silent. Patricia's face had gone from purple to pale. Of course, Marcus continued, I'm a reasonable man. I don't want to deprive my neighbors of their charging station. I'm just asking for what's fair. You remove the charger from my property and install it in an actual community area as Amendment 47B originally specified, and my fence will stop having these mysterious power needs. That's extortion, Patricia sputtered. No, Marcus said, standing to leave. That's negotiation. You have 72 hours to remove the charger, or I call Channel 7. Oh, and my chickens thank you for the free fence power. Egg production is up 20%. As Marcus walked out, he heard Kowalski mutter to his assistant, in 30 years, I've never seen anything like this. Guy's a genius. Outside, Tom Chen was waiting by Marcus's truck, grinning ear to ear. That was beautiful, Marcus. Absolutely beautiful. It's not over yet, Marcus said, but he was smiling too. Patricia doesn't give up easily. He was right. That night, his security cameras caught someone trying to access his junction box. The would-be saboteur gave up after triggering the motion-activated lights Marcus had installed, which also set off the rooster he'd recently added to his flock. Nothing like a rooster crowing at 2 a.m. to discourage trespassers. The war wasn't over, but Marcus had won this battle, and his chickens were safe behind their well-powered fence. The 72-hour deadline came and went without action from the HOA. On the 4th day, Marcus made good on his promise. Tom Chen's daughter, a journalism student at the State University, had connections at Channel 7 News. By Thursday evening, reporter Janet Chen, no relation to Tom, was standing in Marcus's chicken coop, microphone in hand, with the controversial charging station visible in the background. This David versus Goliath story has captivated the Pine Ridge Estates community, Janet reported, as Marcus's chickens pecked around her feet. A local farmer fighting back against what he calls HOA overreach with nothing but ingenuity and a working knowledge of property law. The segment included interviews with frustrated EV owners, footage of the non-functioning charger, and a particularly damning clip of Patricia Kensington refusing to comment while practically running to her Mercedes. But the real coup de grace was the document Marcus provided showing that HOA had never obtained proper permits for installing the charger on private property. By Friday morning, the story had gone viral. #ChickenFencyCharger was trending on social media. Memes featuring angry chickens guarding EV chargers flooded the internet. The HOA's Facebook page was overwhelmed with comments, most supporting Marcus. Even the county commissioner weighed in, praising citizens who stand up for their property rights through creative legal means. Patricia Kensington called an emergency board meeting for Saturday morning. This time, the community center was packed not just with residents, but with reporters and curious observers from neighboring communities. Marcus arrived in his best flannel shirt, carrying a basket of fresh eggs, which he handed out to supporters. The board has reached a decision, Patricia announced, her voice lacking its usual authority. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in a week. In the interest of community harmony and fiscal responsibility, we will be relocating charging station number 3 to the community center parking lot. The room erupted in applause. Marcus stood up. I appreciate the board's reasonable decision. As a gesture of goodwill, I'll be disconnecting my fence from its current power source immediately. And he held up a hand for silence. I'll be donating the installation costs I'm saving to the community garden project. It was a masterful move. Not only had he won, but he positioned himself as the gracious victor, turning potential enemies into allies. Even Bradley Morrison shook his hand afterward, admitting grudgingly that the whole situation had been pretty clever. The removal crew arrived Monday morning. Marcus provided coffee and fresh eggs while they worked, chatting amicably with the workers about electrical codes and chicken breeds. Patricia Kensington watched from her car but didn't approach. By noon, the charging station was gone, leaving only a small patch of disturbed earth. Marcus had already prepared a sign. Future home of Wheeler Farm Fresh Egg Stand. Coming spring 2025. 2 weeks later, at the monthly HOA meeting, there was a notably different atmosphere. Patricia, perhaps chastened by recent events, actually asked for input before making decisions. The board voted to create a new committee, the Property Rights Review Committee, to ensure all future installations complied with both HOA covenants and individual property rights. Marcus was unanimously elected to chair it. Turns out you've created quite a precedent. Richard Steinberg told Marcus after the meeting. 3 other HOAs in the state have already revised their policies based on your case. Just trying to protect my chickens, Marcus said with a slight smile. The charging station worked perfectly in its new location at the community center. Marcus's fence, now powered by a conventional connection, continued to protect his growing flock. He added ducks and was considering geese. The egg stand was already in planning, with Tom Chen offering to help with construction. A month later, Janet Chen returned for a follow-up story. She found Marcus in his coop collecting eggs while a group of neighborhood children watched the chickens through the fence. "Any regrets about how things turned out?" she asked. Marcus considered the question. "Just one," he said finally. "I should have gotten chickens years ago. These fresh eggs are fantastic." As the camera panned over the peaceful scene, chickens scratching in the dirt, the empty corner where the charger once stood, Marcus chatting with neighbors who now bought eggs from him regularly, Janet's voiceover concluded this segment. In an age of increasing HOA authority, Marcus Wheeler proved that sometimes the best response to overreach isn't litigation or confrontation, but creative compliance. His electric fence, powered briefly by community ambition and permanently by principle, stands as a reminder that property rights still matter. And in Pine Ridge estates, they now come with farm-fresh eggs. Marcus never had another serious conflict with the HOA. Patricia Kensington resigned as president 6 months later, replaced by a more collaborative leader. The new board even approved Marcus' application to expand his agricultural operation to include beekeeping. And the electric fence? It still hummed along the property line, protecting Marcus's chickens from predators, both four-legged and bureaucratic. Only now, everyone knew exactly who was paying for the power. In the end, Marcus Wheeler hadn't just won a battle with his HOA. He transformed his corner of Pine Ridge Estates into something better. A place where neighbors bought fresh eggs, children learned about farming, and property rights were respected. All because he refused to let anyone, not even a power-hungry HOA, install anything on his land without permission. The chickens, for their part, continued laying eggs, blissfully unaware they'd been at the center of a suburban revolution. Which was probably for the best. They had enough to worry about with the new rooster Marcus had named Covenant. Patricia Kensington, it was rumored, had switched to a hybrid.